The following program is presented by the Metropolitan Library Service Agency.
Hello, welcome to All About Kids, a program focusing on the interests of children and young people and some of the issues affecting them. Our guest today is author and illustrator of children's books, Barbara McClintock. She'll be talking about her books, but also about her collaboration with the Children's Theater Company in the fall of 1994 on the production of Animal Fables from Aesop. Barbara, it's a pleasure to have you here on All About Kids today. Of course, as a children's librarian, I've known about your books, particularly your wonderful book, Animal Fables from Aesop, which was a 1992 American Library Association Best Books for Children. And it's been used a lot in story times here in the Hennepin County Library and certainly by children's librarians all over the country. And you are here in Minneapolis because the Children's Theater Company is adapting this book into a stage play. And when I first heard that Children's Theater was going to do this, I thought, this is really a short book. It's wonderful, but how are they going to take 9 Aesop's fables, give them some consistency, and make a play out of it? And you're helping them do that.
Right. Well, I am very, very thrilled with the fact that they were able to augment my book and the stories in it. They used a lot of the gestures and the characterization of the animals and the basic sense of costume and stage design as a jumping off point for the wonderful, wonderful magic that they've spun from this. And the Children's Theater Company has created a ballet, kind of an operatic ballet out of the book. And has done just a marvelous job of extending and augmenting the characters and their gestures. Wendy Lair, the director, has done an absolutely brilliant job of this. And in discussions early on with her about how to do this book and extend it and make it into a richer, cohesive, more full-bodied piece, we talked about adding on some fables and also having something that would tie all of these little fragments of stories together. And she and the writer hit on the idea of introducing the fable of the tortoise and the hare, which I did not include in this book, as a way of kind of gluing the whole thing together. So as the play opens, there is a fair going on and the animals dance in, and there is an enormous contest a race between the hare and the tortoise, and they start off and you see them appearing and reappearing throughout the play, and it gives some sort of sense of something flowing through it. And then
and it would give a sense of activity and life, and of course children are always looking for that in drama. And
absolutely.
Also, it sounds like a sense of fun. I think sometimes we think of the fables as being very moralistic, very didactic. Mm-hmm. You read these to children so they will learn how to behave or how to act, and obviously the play will have some of that, but it's going to be much more. And in looking at your books, you have a wicked sense of humor, I think, in the illustrations. And there is a great deal of fun just looking at these stylized but action-packed figures. And you mentioned that Wendy Lair has looked at your pictures and seen the potential for dance in them, because some of your characters pose in ballet positions. And what an incredible, I've looked at this book a lot, but not until I read that in a review in the local newspaper did I see, why, that's right, that is the 5th position.
Yes, yes, that's absolutely true. Well, one thing that I really wanted to do with these fables that is different than a traditional way of illustrating Aesop's fables is that I wanted to select just a few characters to work with, and I love developing personalities and of whatever I'm dealing with or whomever I'm dealing with in my books. So by isolating the fox, the cat, the mice, and the wolf, and bringing them back time and time again, you got a sense of knowing who they were, and rather than just taking a specific fable and doing a one-shot illustration with it, I wanted to elaborate it, to draw it out, to give a sense of gesture and movement and playfulness to the whole thing.
I think the fox is the character that stands out most in my mind. He has all kinds of characteristics, arrogant and silly and disgruntled and mad and sulky, a lot of the characteristics that children and adults have.
Right, absolutely. And in fact, one thing that I love about the fables is that they poke gentle fun at foibles that we all have, and in a redeeming way too, that they get into trouble because of their personality traits, and then they fall in their face and pick themselves up and keep going. And I think that's a really, really marvelous thing in these stories.
Something fun for the audience to think about after the play is over, after they've read the book. Yes. You must have had a real lifelong interest, or at least an interest since you've become an adult, an author, and illustrator, in theater and dramatics, because the book opens with a scene, all the characters on stage, and it's obvious that you even thought about this as a play long before Children's Theatre Company thought about mounting it.
Yes, I did. I love the theater and have always been enthusiastic about acting out characters. When I was a child, I would draw characters on the shirt cardboards from my father's delivery of dry clean shirts, and color them in and then cut them out, and I would play with them and they would interact. And I think that there's just always been an interest, a personal interest in my way of drawing and perceiving things, to have that sense of someone on a stage. And even some of my strongest influences in my artwork were about drawing things from the Commedia dell'arte, extended gestures, actors and actresses, and I think there's a playful quality, and I think that by using gesture, by using subtle facial nuance, you can express a lot of narrative material in a very simple and direct form. And I don't do just set pieces, because I really do enjoy storytelling through my artwork.
I think your books are sophisticated. You do not in any way write down or illustrate down to young children, but I think that children respond very enthusiastically to these. And when you talk about doing a book that this story comes from the art, certainly the first book you published, The Heartaches of a French Cat, it's a wordless picture book, as we say in our trade, and this is done in black and white, but again, that sense of Italian theater, European theater, very dramatic, very poignant, all the actions taking place through your illustration, and it's a marvelous book for children. And this too has a real sense of the theater. You know, at the beginning, here's a modern child and his family attending the theater, and the cast of characters. So kids pick this book up and they think, this is a play that I'm going to be reading about.
Right, yes. And one nice thing about this book, in fact, about Aesop's Fables too, is that children can pace themselves as they go through the book, and they can linger on a picture or a gesture or a operatic pose, and depending on how that particular image touches them, and then they can move on from that. And I've found in my reading of these books to children that there certainly are fables or are certain illustrations in The Heartaches of a French Cat that touch them. They really, And in a group of children, certain parts touch certain children, and others.
Going out
You know,
into the
just goes
snow
into
with the
that.
baby in her hand.
Yes, right, exactly.
Well, obviously you're very intense about the books that you've written and illustrated. How does it feel to see your books coming alive on the stage now? Children's Theater Company, of course, has a national reputation as being as true to the author and illustrator's original ideas, but it must have been kind of scary to think, well, are they going to get those characters right? And what do you mean adding music and dance and having a whole play where the characters don't speak? How did you work with the theater?
Well, Wendy and I had phone conversations about how things were being put together, and I knew that she was right on the mark about the characters. She really knew the subtle differences between the wolf, the fox, all of these characters, and it was just phenomenal. It was as if they reached into my head and pulled out all these very private thoughts that I'd had about these characters, because generally a lot of thought goes into each one of them in research, and there are subtleties that she perceived that I thought maybe weren't even that obvious. So I knew she was right on the mark with what had to be done with the story, and I had real confidence and faith in her. And I'd seen a production at the Children's Theater before of Madeline to the Rescue, and it was so much the book coming to life. So I knew that I was in excellent hands, and indeed I was. As when I saw the first dress rehearsal, it was the most wonderfully traumatic experience I've ever had. The book just sprang to life, and the set designer had caught the subtlety of my line, the thick and thin quality of it. The animals were acting out in gesture. The wolf was posing the way that my wolf had done, and all these little images I'd had in my head of each and every one of these animals was caught perfectly on stage.
Well, that's interesting, because does the Children's Theater Company, who's going to be performing the play, have the opportunity to look at the book, to read the book, to live with the book?
Yes, very much so. Very much so. They really used this as a point of inspiration for them. So not only are the costumes in keeping with what is in the illustrations and the set design, but also the subtlety of the characterizations of each one of the characters, and their gesture and their sense of movement, and even the funny things they've said. Whatever these animals were basically about, the theater has taken and extended it just as they would be. It's as if you were meeting a child and spending 15 minutes with them, and then they go off and you see them a week later for a period of an hour just acting out and doing what they were doing. It was so close to the original point of heart, I guess, from what I had done in the book. It was just phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. This has been just one of the most amazing experiences. For you, and you said
your young son has been absolutely fascinated too, watching these rehearsals and seeing again the book coming to life. I think that's one of the best things that the Children's Theater Company has always done, because we who hold books in a somewhat sacred place in our lives worry when something is going to be mounted. We see the movies that have totally disregarded the real story, and Children's Theater has never done anything that would upset a child. I think if a kid comes to the theater thinking he or she is going to see Madeline, they see Madeline, they know it's Madeline. And I'm sure that Aesop's Fables may not be one of those books on every child's favorite bedtime reading list, but after seeing this production, I bet your book will check out of the library much faster. You said as a child it was one of your favorite books.
Yes, it was. I had an edition that was illustrated by Milos Forman, and it had been my father's book. So it was a wonderful, wonderful first edition that I read to death, and the pages were dropping out of the binding. But I loved it. I absolutely loved the stories. I always loved anthropomorphism, and I was so pleased to be able to bring these fables to life, these stories that were so near and dear to me, and had such an influence really in my life. And to this day, some of the fables, some of the stories and ideas are there for me to fall back on if I have certain decisions to make, or certain points in my life where I can say, yes, look before you leap, and all of those other
early reading really
stories.
does impact your life.
Yes, very much so.
When you work with the Children's Theater Company, for instance, the costumes, did you help as they were being designed to see that the dyes were right, or when the masks were being created, or did you just wait to be surprised?
Well, I got an hour's worth of faxes one day from the costume designer, and his interpretations of my costumes were absolutely exquisite. And over the phone, I followed along with the process of their trying to find a lightweight material, a way of constructing these masks that would fit over the actors' heads, enable them to dance and act out without these masks becoming an encumbrance. And but I didn't see the actual masks until I got here, and I was delightfully and pleasantly surprised and very pleased with them.
Well, as I understand it, the actors can see out because of the way the fabric is constructed,
Yes.
but the audience won't be able to tell that. It will look like the animal's face.
Absolutely, and that's exactly the way it works. There's a very fine meshing that goes around the face, and the hair, which is in either human or yak hair, was stitched in by hand. And these
Really?
masks,
Human or yak?
yes,
Y-A-K?
yes,
Ah.
and other fabrics or yarns or things too were added into the back of the masks, and they look very different close up than they do at a distance. And this is the brilliance of the fellow who designed the masks, was that they do, you really see them as the characters here. He has a real sense of depth and being away from something, and how things will work. And the detailing on the costumes is exquisite. On the buttons, there are painted highlights on the top, and then cross-hatching for shadows on the bottom of the buttons. And these are, to my mind, would be details that would be lost sitting way in the back of an audience for what was going on in the stage. But they all add to that wonderful quality that I think the children's theater is so known for, and it was certainly
Well,
nice in my
it's quality,
production.
and I think it's quality based on a great respect for children and an understanding that this type of theater introduces children not only to literature in a different way, but to a whole world of exploration that they can continue on as adults. And I think a lot of times children don't have an opportunity to see live drama anymore, and that's really too bad.
That's true, and it really carries along the oral tradition of reading books in a library out loud to a group of children. I think there's an immediacy and something that's very tangible and hands-on to children, both in books and with what I've seen with the theater, much more so than seeing things on a flat screen, that just because something becomes lost there, or impersonal, and certainly it's a wonderful medium, and there are a lot of great things going on with it, and I think we'll see a lot happening with CD-ROMs and with computers and on video. But one thing that I loved so much about the theater was that it had such a direct link in with that oral tradition and sensibility of storytelling.
And there's something that
Marvelous.
you gain by being in an audience where people are reacting to the same things and understanding that those are people up there, or those are animals up there that are bringing things to life.
Yes.
It's an extension of the imagination. Well, will your son be sitting there on opening night when the play opens, the 2nd of September, 1994?
Yes, he will be, and both he and my husband and myself, and I think that he's going to be just enthralled with the whole thing. He's totally fallen in love with the theater, so I think we might have a budding actor on our hands.
Well, I think we'll take a little time and And look at the proofs of your next book, which is The Battle of Luke and Longnose. And Luke looks to me like a very daring young hero who must be about 8 years old, just the age of the young man in your family.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, my son Larson posed for many of these pictures. Bless his buttons. He actually stood still long enough in some of them. He donned his cape and used a sword.
Well, it's an imaginative book, and the colors are rich and deep, and there's more of it, more illustration, it seems to me, than in your other 2 books. And it starts out again with a theatrical theme.
Right.
There's young Luke in bed with his toy theater at the side of his bed, and obviously this is a dream.
Yes.
And I can see it coming to life on the stage, perhaps here in another few years. But all the drama that goes with lavish, this is almost an opera sort of theatrical book.
Yes, it is. And I wanted to do something that was really more of a picture book, a straight picture book. So the pictures have stepped in a bit more and have augmented the text, which has become a bit more minimal. But I think that there's a balance, there's a terseness that happens there that's really lively and delightful. And a lot of this was brought about by observing Larson playing and imagining what would happen if he were back in the 19th century when these little toy cardboard theaters were quite popular. How he would interact with the characters. There were many scenes of cutout characters from the Battle of Waterloo or Shakespearean plays. These theaters were the Nintendo games of their day, and there was that direct interaction that was going on in a small scale that we see with Aesop's fables being brought to life. And I just was very captivated by what Larson would do with all of that. Of course, he'd put himself in center stage and become bigger than life and do battle with an evil villain. And
that's what children and their imaginations do. I think that's a real healthy sort of thing. And do you think you're going to continue in this theatrical vein in your books? You're working closely with an editor who's given you a lot of help and advice. Is she going to be here, in fact, for the opening of children's
unfortunately, she won't be, but I'm sure that she'll try to see the show when it goes on tour during this fall season. But she's very excited about all of this, and I've had a wonderful working relationship with her. She's been with me on both Aesop's Fables and Heartaches, and now with Luke and Longnose. So we'll be seeing more of the same theatricality and exuberance.
That's something that we don't see much about, or much of, I don't think, in children's books. Again, that extension of the imagination. How, when you were translating, I don't know if that's the word to use, adapting Aesop's Fables to this production, did you work with the choreographer? Do you have dance in your background too, or?
Not really, but I love watching dance, and it just all is a organic, very organic thing in me. I just draw this way. I have a spirited quality in the way I animate characters, and I lived in New York for 11 years and went to the ballet and went to the opera and was able to soak in a lot of all of that wonderful material. So it just all comes out. But what the Children's Theatre has done with extending this sense of gesture and dance is just incredible and charming and funny. There is a sequence with the lamb who meets up with the wolf, and the lamb dances and kicks just like a spring lamb. It is just, you just can't imagine it. It's really something you have to see and witness. But it's just perfect. It's just taking an idea of mine. I could see myself doing many drawings of that. And when I conceive a book, I do drawings in a sketchbook, little sketches of a character, acting things out, and then I either do little word balloons over the character or a little storyline underneath. and then I build it in that way. So seeing what goes on in the theater and this extension into ballet and choreography is an absolute natural for the way that I work and think visually.
Well, you mentioned CD-ROMs a minute ago, and it seems to me like this must be the ultimate CD-ROM, from
I guess
sketch
so.
to book to illustration to magnificent performance. Well, Barbara, it's been wonderful having you on All About Kids, and I'm looking forward to seeing your production, which airs, what doesn't air, it's going to be performed at Children's Theatre Company through the end of October 1994, and then it goes on tour, you said.
Yes.
What cities will you be visiting?
Well, it will go through California, Denver, all throughout the Southwest, and I'm not exactly sure what the entire tour schedule is, but I am sure that if anyone is interested in relatives across the country seeing this, that if they call the Children's Theatre, someone there would be happy to give them that information.
Well, great. We'll look forward to more of your books and to this, and break a leg.
I can, not the dancers. All right. Well, thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure.
Literature comes to life on the stage of Children's Theatre Company in the fall of 1994. Thank you, Barbara McClintock, and thanks to all of you for joining us on All About Kids. Please tune in again.
This has been a presentation of Hennepin County Library in conjunction with the Twin Cities Metropolitan Library Service Agency. We thank you for watching, and we hope you visit your public library often.